Istanbul is where it is because of its location in relationship to several bodies of water. It's at the Bosphorus choke point, so there's no difficulty in sealing off the flow of traffic from the Black Sea to the Mediterranean. On the other side of the old city is the Sea of Marmara. And finally, on the third side is the Golden Horn. The result is the city only has to be defended on one landward side. Like all old Greek cities, this one has a founding legend. It was founded at about the same time that the city of Rome was in the 8th century BC, and legend has it that there was a Greek called Byzas from the city of Megara, which is not too far from Athens. He sailed off looking for a new city, and he, like everyone else, sought advice from the oracle at Delphi. The oracle advised him to found the city opposite the village of the blind. When Byzas and his fellow colonists sailed up the Bosphorus, they noticed the colony on the Asian shore, and they looked to the left and they saw the superb natural harbor of the Golden Horn on the European shore. Thinking those people must be blind, they settled on the opposite shore, and so the city took the name of its founder, Byzantion. In Latin, that becomes Byzantium. In the 4th century, Constantine moved the capital of Rome to this location, and he dubbed the new city New Rome. That didn't stick. It was called Constantinople very quickly, that is, the city of Constantine. The Turks called the city Istanbul. Istanbul, however, is not Turkish. It's really just a corruption of some Greek words that the Turks misunderstood. This means in the city. Officially, the name of the city was Constantinople all through the period of the Sultans. It wasn't changed officially to Istanbul until 1930. So now you know how the city got its name.
Constantinople, now it's Istanbul, not Constantinople, been a long time gone. Constantinople, now it's Turkish delight on a moonlit night. Every gal in Constantinople lives in Istanbul, not Constantinople. So if you've a date in Constantinople, she'll be waiting in Istanbul. Even old New York was once New Amsterdam. Why they changed it, I can't say. You just like it better that way. So take me back to Constantinople. No, you can't go back to Constantinople. Been a long time gone. Constantinople, why did Constantinople get the works? That's nobody's business but the Turks. Istanbul, Istanbul. Istanbul, Istanbul. Even old New York was once New Amsterdam. Why they changed it, I can't say. You just liked it better that way. Istanbul is Constantinople, now it's Istanbul, not Constantinople. Been a long time gone. Constantinople, why did Constantinople get the works? That's nobody's business but the Turks. So take me back to Constantinople. No, you can't go back to Constantinople. Been a long time gone. Constantinople, why did Constantinople get the works? That's nobody's business but the Turks. Istanbul.
If there's any one icon for Istanbul, it's got to be the Hagia Sophia, or sometimes it's called the Hagia Sophia or Saint Sophia. In any event, this particular structure was built in 532 to 537 during the reign of Emperor Justinian. Actually, it replaced an earlier St. Sophia. The earlier St. Sophia was destroyed by a riot, but I'll tell that story later. The central open space is over 100 feet wide. The dome itself rises to about something over 150 feet above the ground. The dome is supported by 40 massive ribs, and these are constructed of special hollow bricks made in roads from a unique light porous clay, and they're resting on huge pillars that are concealed inside the interior walls. But what really makes the Hagia Sophia is the mosaics. The mosaics were covered up during the period of time when it was a mosque, of course, but now many of them have been uncovered. My favorite is the mosaic of the Empress Zoe. She reigned from 1028 to 50, and she had 3 husbands, and so they had to change this mosaic portrait each time she picked up a new husband. The current portrait is the 3rd Mr. Zoe, Constantine the 9th. Constantine the 9th has survived only because Constantine the 9th outlived the Empress. The Blue Mosque is right across a park from the Hagia Sophia. The Blue Mosque is officially the mosque of Sultan Ahmet I. It was built at the beginning of the 17th century, and therefore it's over 1,000 years younger than the Hagia Sophia, although the two of them look very much alike. The Blue Mosque isn't blue on the outside, it's kind of a gray. It gets its name from the ceiling on the inside, which is inlaid with some distinctive blue tiles. This is a working mosque, so you're limited as to what you can do on the inside. Nevertheless, they do allow some photography, and this is the inside of the mosque. But you'll notice that there's something extremely different about this mosque from the Hagia Sophia. Notice that unlike the Hagia Sophia, which has a completely open space, this particular building has its dome supported by 4 massive columns. It's those 4 massive columns that show that this is technologically an inferior building. The Hagia Sophia and the Blue Mosque stand at the core of the old part of the city. And this is also near some other very interesting sites that I want to show you. The first one is the milestone. This is the stone by which all mileage is calculated from the city of New Rome or Constantinople. When New Rome was established, Constantine set up this pillar, now surrounded by scaffolding, and put a statue up on top of it to celebrate the reestablishment of the city. This next is very interesting. It's very close to the Hagia Sophia down in downtown Constantinople, and you can see fish swimming around, but it looks very, very dark. The fact of the matter is, this is the Roman cistern. This is where the fresh water was kept for the city, and it's not the only cistern. There are at least 3 of them that I know of, and there were probably hundreds. Of course, it's underground. This one was built in 542 during the reign of Emperor Justinian. Now this cistern is a vast pillared hall with semicircular arches holding up the roof. There are more than 300 pillars here. Notice that even in this functional underground area, the tops of the pillars, the capitals, are decorated with elaborate carvings. These tend to be Corinthian capitals. This cistern has the capacity to hold something like 500,000 gallons of water. As bizarre as this place might be, it should seem somewhat vaguely familiar to you. You've probably seen it before. It was part of the movie From Russia with Love with James Bond.
Quite a place you've got here. The Emperor Constantine built it as a reservoir 1,600 years ago.
Really?
Here.
This next is the Bin Bierdorek cistern. It's the second largest cistern in town, sometimes called the Cistern of 1,001 Columns. This cistern is believed to have been built under the house of a Roman senator that accompanied Constantine to the new city. The cistern is about 200 feet long by about 160 feet wide. The columns are about 40 feet tall. This cistern must surely be one of Istanbul's best kept secrets. It turns out that all of the muck has not yet been removed from this cistern. The floor is at the top of the muck, but if you were to dig below the floor and start removing stuff, those columns would be a lot taller. There's a little section of the floor where they have removed all of the sediment, and you can see the original floor of the cistern. Well, it's time for us to start going back up to the surface now and continue our tour of Istanbul. We're in the Hippodrome, where the chariot races were. Use your imagination. The Hippodrome factions started out in the ancient Roman trade guilds, which in Byzantine times developed into further associations. The blues were generally upper class, politically conservative, orthodox regarding religion, while the greens were from the lower classes, more radical in their political and religious views. You could think of them as Republicans and Democrats, if you like. In any event, the factions were the focus of a serious rivalry in Constantinople, centered on the circus events in the Hippodrome. But in 532, that rivalry was pretty much forgotten, and the members of the blue and green factions combined against Emperor Justinian in a protest against heavy taxation. And that resulted in riots, which resulted in the burning of the original Hagia Sophia Church. And Justinian was about ready to run away when his wife, Theodora, stopped him. The Empress Theodora had been a courtesan, and she wasn't anxious to go back to her old life. Instead, she got Justinian to bring in his general Belisarius and the army, and the result was 30,000 greens and a few hundred blues were trapped in the Hippodrome and killed. It was a number of years before the Greens recovered as a political and sporting faction. The center of the Hippodrome had three basic objects in it. One was the obelisk that had originally been erected in Egypt for Thutmose III. The Romans carried it to Constantinople to decorate the new city. The second one had been taken from Delphi, and this was a tripod that had a twisty stem to it. That twist was supposed to be three serpents that came up and supported the brazier. This second column had on it some bronze plates. Those bronze plates were removed by the Fourth Crusade crusaders that invaded the city around 1200. In fact, those crusaders did considerable amount of damage to Byzantium, and I believe it's a primary reason why it eventually fell to the Muslims in 1453. This model may help you to visualize the Hippodrome. It was found in the Bin Bierdorek cistern that we were at earlier. This next is the only surviving aqueduct from the Roman period. It's the aqueduct of the Emperor Valens. Incidentally, it was raining that day, and so the aqueduct would have been carrying something that we had very little need of on that particular day at least. This aqueduct brought water in from the Belgrade forests. Incidentally, the Emperor Valens did not end well. It's unusual, but he was one of the few Roman emperors that was killed along with the majority of his army. In this particular case, he lost the Battle of Adrianople. He was defeated by the Goths. I'm going to be moving now out to the city walls. For the most part, the city walls were built by the Emperor Theodosius. He expanded the city that Constantine had left him. This is the anchor of the city walls of the Sea of Marmara. This is the strongest point in the walls. This particular point was never breached by anyone. This area is called the Golden Gate. It's called the Golden Gate because it was the strongest, but it's also the gate of the city that victorious Byzantine generals used to lead their armies through. It's sort of a triumphal entrance, a ceremonial entrance to the city, if you will. Being the strongest and best protected, it only had to have about a platoon of soldiers to hold it and one officer. The walls around the city were about 15 miles long and had 96 towers. When the Turks came to besiege the city in 1453, this area of the wall was not much in danger. At that time, there was about 15 miles of wall around Byzantium. The landward side was under attack by the Muslims. The Byzantines were holding the city with only about 7,000 troops. The Muslim forces had roughly 100,000. Now, the science fiction weapon of these days was the cannon, and the Ottomans decided that they were going to depend heavily on this particular new device, and so they employed a Hungarian or perhaps a German by the name of Urban, who was a specialist in the construction of cannons. Urban developed a cannon that could throw a ball that weighed 1,200 pounds. The thing was 27 feet long. On the downside for the Turks, though, the cannon could hardly hit anything. It was highly inaccurate, and it took 3 hours to reload. In addition, cannonballs that size were in short supply. There's a rumor that it collapsed from its own recoil after 6 weeks of operation. In the area where the motorway is now in front of the walls, there had been a large water moat. That large piece of artillery that I was talking about that Urban created, folks say that it took 90 oxen and 400 men to operate that cannon. And it never really worked very well. The fact of the matter is the Byzantines were able to repair almost all the damage that it did after every shot that it fired. But it wasn't the only cannon that the Turks had. Between the gate, which is now called the Topkapi Gate, which means Cannonball Gate, and Edirne Kapi, which was the gate out to Adrianople, there was a slight depression, a little valley formed by the Lycus River. That river is filled in now, but that depression still exists, and that's where the artillery focused its fire, because it had a slight advantage. Even today, the city walls are in their weakest condition at this particular point. In addition, as the attack started, the Turks also tried to tunnel under the walls, and the Byzantines counter-tunneled under the command of an engineer named Johannes Grant, who is said to have been German, but was probably actually Scottish. Use your imagination now for a second to see the siege.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. It's the Sultan's army.
These appear to be some war surplus cannonballs. Notice that they're made out of stone. But neither the cannonballs, nor the tunneling, nor the massive numbers of troops was having much effect on the siege. The Turks were still outside, and the Byzantines still held the walls. While we're walking along the walls, I want to show you a church that's just inside the walls. It's Chora Church, and it has some absolutely fantastic mosaics on the inside. In fact, I think they're better than the ones at Hagia Sophia. Like Hagia Sophia, the Chora Church is no longer a church. It's a museum. Both Hagia Sophia and the Chora Church are museums, in fact. Chora means in the country, and in the 1300s this place was in the country. It's near the Aderna Capi, the place where Constantine the 11th had his headquarters. At the end of the siege, when he realized that all was lost, he rode directly into the midst of the Turkish army near here, and his body was never identified. The interior of the church is absolutely covered with mosaics. Most of them show little vignettes from the Bible, stories about Christ or perhaps the apostles usually. Coming up is the woman that grabbed hold of the hem of Christ's garment as he was passing by. And then we're going to go over and we're going to see Lazarus being raised from the dead. Next we'll be seeing St. Paul, followed by St. Peter. Now remember, these mosaics are supposed to be in a church that is fairly dark but lit by candlelight. And the candlelight is what sets the mosaics off and makes them so pretty. They'll be shimmering and shining and changing color just a little bit along with the light source. Finally, we're going back outside again and back on the walls. And we're going to be continuing our walk north along the walls. And we're going to be reaching the part of the walls which was critical. This little bulge that you're about to see in the walls was identified by a number of conquerors, and there are only two people that really breached these walls, the Fourth Crusaders and the Turks. Both of them went through at this particular point. And here's the reason. These are not Roman-style construction walls. These walls are much more medieval and much weaker and much easier to get through. But it may not have been weak walls that caused the fall of Constantinople. Some historians suggest that the gate in this particular section of wall had been left unlocked, and the Ottomans discovered the mistake, and there's no suggestion yet of bribery or deceit or anything like that. It simply seems to have been overlooked. Anyway, the Ottomans rushed in, and that was the end of the defense of Constantinople. This is Topkapi Palace. It's back down near the Hagia Sophia, but don't confuse this with Topkapi, the gate in the wall. It's not the same at all. Topkapi is made up of a series of courtyards. We're in the first courtyard now, and that's the one that's available to everyone. This gate goes through to the second courtyard. To get through to the second courtyard, you have to be on some kind of official business. We'll be going to the third courtyard later. That's only open to the imperial family. And then there'll be a fourth courtyard that's open only to the family itself. This model of Topkapi starts at the gate to the second courtyard, and it'll probably give you a better idea of the size and complexity of the palace than anything I can do with the videotape. If you're on important imperial business, you'll probably be meeting with somebody in one of these next couple of hallways. The harem is the most popular point of visiting at Topkapi. Imperial princes were brought up in the palace harem. They were taught and cared for by its women and servants. In the early centuries, Ottoman princes were schooled in combat and statecraft by direct experience. They practiced soldiering. They fought in battles. They were given provinces to administer. But as the Ottoman dynasty did not observe the rule of primogeniture, the death of the Sultan regularly resulted in a fratricidal bloodbath, as his sons had to slog it out among themselves for the throne. In the case of Bayezid II, his sons began the battles even before his father's death. Now realizing that to lose meant certain death for themselves. The victorious son, Selim, forced Bayezid to abdicate and may even have had him murdered. Ahmet I couldn't bring himself to murder his mad brother Mustafa. Instead, he kept him imprisoned in the harem and thus began the tradition of the cage life. Later sultans followed the idea of house arrest, which meant that princes fell prey to the intrigues of women and eunuchs who ran the harem. Corrupted by the pleasures of the harem and ignorant of war and statecraft, they were usually unfit to rule when the occasion arose. Luckily for the empire, there were a number of grand viziers who were quite competent. Later, the Ottomans did adopt primogeniture, but by that time, it was too late. Let's see what's in here. Behind me is the treasury, but there's no photography allowed, so you'll have to use your imagination once more.
That is the Topkapi.
Topkapi? Topkapi? Where the Sultan's harems were?
Better. Topkapi, where the treasure room is. And in the treasure room, there is a glass case. And in the glass case, there is a sultan. And on the sultan, there is a dagger. And on the dagger, there are the four most beautiful emeralds on earth. The Topkapi emeralds. But they won't be there for much longer, I hope.
You're not thinking of,
I can't think of anything else.
Topkapi, isn't it?
The Topkapi emeralds are large, but they're dwarfed by the spoonmaker's diamond. It's an 86-carat rock, surrounded by several dozen smaller stones, and it gained its name after it was found in a rubbish dump and bought by a street peddler for 3 spoons. The peddler sold it to a jeweler, and then all hell broke loose when it was discovered to be a diamond, the world's 5th largest. Inevitably, the news leaked out, and the Sultan demanded it be given to him. This is the Egyptian spice market. It's the 2nd largest bazaar in old Istanbul. It's a covered bazaar, like the largest bazaar, but its specialty traditionally has been spices. Now, they don't sell as many spices as they used to. It used to be you could go in here and buy just about anything on the face of the planet that could be vaguely described as spices, including gunpowder and all kinds of stuff. Nowadays, it's more oriented to the tourist, but not entirely so. They still do sell some spices. Our final subject now to wind up this video is Turkish Delight, which is sold here. They say the Turkish Delight in Istanbul is the best. Turkish Delight has been on sale here for a very long time. In fact, it's been on sale in Istanbul for about 230 years. A fellow by the name of Ali Muhyiddin came to Istanbul, and he established himself as a confectioner. And he was bored with the usual stuff, so he started playing around with a new confection. And lokum is what the local folks call it now. And it was an immediate hit with the Imperial Palace. And anything that went down well with the palace, of course, was going to be a hit in town. You've almost certainly heard of Turkish Delight before, if for no other reason than because it plays in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. This is the candy that the witch used to bribe Edmund.
Can you make me taller?
Anything you'd like to eat?
Turkish Delight?
Edmund, I would very much like to meet the rest of your family.